and said that we should turn over the rehab of Puerto Rico to the Clinton Foundation. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. You will get your audio back momentarily. I was predisposed with something, and I left the mic button off after the clip. You should be getting some audio back. All right, stand by. Hopefully we'll... all right, Dano regrouped, hit that link. All right. Now, hopefully everybody's back. Okay, that one was terminated. That one says it's still live. That one is still going, so it must have kicked out. I don't know what happened. So we're on our second broadcast, apparently. But we are going to go. All right. Thank you, Dano, for putting that in the chat room. I bet you might want to do that a couple more times. I don't know why that terminated like that. I don't know. I saw that it went, maybe when it goes silent for so long, it automatically terminates. That's what I'm guessing. All right, here we go. We're going to talk now about Senator Tom Cotton. And Senator Cotton is one of the guys that I agree with him most of the time, not all the time. But he's a veteran of, I think, company command. I think he made it to 03. So he did a tour, and then there were maybe two, and then he got out. Now he thinks he's George S. Patton. But he talks a lot more sense than most. And Senator Tom Cotton talks about potential for decertifying the Iran deal. This is from the Conservative Treehouse and Sundance. There's a myriad of complexity within the Iran issue that extends beyond the substantive issue of whether or not President Trump should again certify compliance with the Iran nuclear deal. I don't agree with that statement. I don't see where the complexity is. However, for clarity, President Trump would not be ending the deal or ending the agreement. The president is required every 90 days to certify that Iran is upholding the terms of the nuclear agreement. The next certification is due on October 15th. If President Trump does not, because he cannot, certify compliance, he notifies Congress. It's up to Congress to decide what to do from there. Therefore, President Trump would not be tearing up the agreement, nor would he be ending the agreement. He would simply be notifying Congress of the compliance of Iran or lack thereof, according to the monitoring agencies that report to the president. That's it. Now, let me see. Do we have, are we good in the chat room? Can you guys hear me now? Okay, there we go. Looks like Doc says he's on it. So, we're going to go with that. So just watch the chat room. Hopefully everybody is on board. Let's listen to Senator Tom Cotton. Go.
General Mattis was pressed on this question on Tuesday by Senator Angus King and others when he was testifying. He was asked, would he urge the president to recertify? And he said yes. He thought that was, of course, the president should consider. And then Senator King really pushed him on the core issue. Do you think that it is in the national interest of the United States to remain in this deal, whether this agreement is in the national security interest of the United States? And if you saw the clips, you saw General Mattis take a long pause, think about it, and then say, yes, Senator, I do. So he's disagreeing with you about the fundamentals here, that he sees this agreement as being in our national security interest. Why is General Mattis wrong about this, and you're right?
Well, I respect General Mattis, but I disagree with him here. And it's not General Mattis's decision to make, nor is it Rex Tillerson, nor is it Mike Pompeo, nor is it H.R. McMaster. It's the President's decision to make. They advise, he decides. I have not heard from anyone, no one in the Cabinet, no one outside the government, the answer to the fundamental question of what happens in the second half of the last decade, or the next decade. Moreover, in almost every way, delay plays into Iran's hands. It allows them to strengthen and grow their economy. It creates more time for Western businesses to entrench themselves in Iran's economy, creating a pro-Iran lobby inside our countries. It allows them to get closer and closer to a breakout time of a matter of weeks, not 1 year, not even months. It allows them to continue to sow chaos and discord throughout the region. So is often the case when dealing with a weaker but aggressive revisionist power, time is not on our side. Time is on their side, just as you saw in North Korea in the 1990s and 2000.
So there you go. And I don't think there's any question that people in the United States are dismayed when it comes to these top military leaders wanting to recertify this and giving this thing credence. I guess they forgot about the cold cash that went on the tarmac when this was occurring. But ladies and gentlemen, just for the future, there's a feature. There was a problem on Spreaker because it was my fault. I did not have the mic button pushed right, and there was a level of silence for too long, and the show terminated. The episode automatically shut itself off, and then people didn't know how to get back on. Well, the way you do that when you're on Spreaker, the app, I heard people listening on the app said there was no problem. They had it fine. But if you go on the Spreaker and you go under Explore, if this happens again, because they were listening to a dead link, if you go on Explore and then you go under Live Shows, you had to scroll down a little bit, hit more and then scroll down, and you hit on that, my show will show up if it's live there, and that's how you get the second one. So anyway, a little bit of inside baseball there. Let's move on to United Press International. And Justice Department gives last chance for sanctuary cities to comply. Oh, happy day, ladies and gentlemen. The Justice Department on Thursday sent out a last chance warning for several U.S. cities to comply with federal immigration laws, the latest step in a battle over so-called sanctuary cities. Let the battle begin. That was me. The Justice Department has threatened to cut off federal funding to boost law enforcement in cities that do not comply with the Department of Homeland Security's efforts to identify and deport undocumented immigrants. The cities cited by the Justice Department were New York, Chicago, and surrounding Cook County, Illinois, New Orleans, and Philadelphia. Those cities were given a deadline of October 27th to provide the Justice Department with documentation proving their existing laws and law enforcement practices are in line with federal immigration policy. And I want to show you what the clown show is going to look like when this happens. They are going to line up their attorney generals, and they are going to literally sue the federal government to get somebody else's money. They're going to try to make it look like they're entitled to the taxpayer money coming out of Kansas, or some other state. It's absolutely bizarre, the entitlement mentality of these bottom feeders. But that's going to happen, I guarantee you. Two other jurisdictions, the state of Connecticut and Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, heeded the Justice Department warnings and reversed policies meant to shield undocumented immigrants from possible deportation. Additionally, the Justice Department said subsequent investigations found that Miami-Dade County, Florida, and Clark County, Nevada, where Las Vegas is located, were already in accordance with federal immigration law, though previously they had been listed otherwise. Several U.S. cities and counties passed local laws or enacted procedures that prohibit law enforcement from notifying Homeland Security when an undocumented immigrant is identified or arrested. Critics have dubbed such places sanctuary cities. Proponents have argued that enlisting street-level police to enforce national immigration policy makes it harder for them to investigate and stop crimes, because undocumented immigrants won't cooperate if they think they'll be deported. And all these people are trying to do is get more votes. I mean, it's absolutely sickening. But it's happening, and you're going to see, it's going to be comical, the pushback from these leftist cities. I just wish Pittsburgh was a big enough city, which it's not. It's barely a city. I mean, it's got less than 300,000 people, down almost 700,000 from when the Democrats took over in the 1930s. But it'll be fun to watch this. It will. Now, something else is developing in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe has turned out to be closer to what we were than Western Europe. The Czech president calls for a European Second Amendment for self-defense against terrorists. I think that's great. I mean, I think that absolutely they should have that. This is from Breitbart and Jack Montgomery. Czech President Miloš Zeman has said Europeans should have the courage to invest in our own guns in order to guard against international terrorism like millions of U.S. citizens have. The elder statesman, a veteran of the Prague Spring uprising against the old communist regime, as well as the Velvet Revolution, which finally brought it down, made his comments in an address to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, an intergovernmental forum which predates the quasi-federal European Union by several years. The level of international crime is growing because of Islamic terrorism, he said, in response to a question from an Armenian politician. I am open and frank, and I do not use the phrase Islamic terrorism lightly, but in the overwhelming majority of cases, it has Islamic origin. It is connected with genocide in Armenia. And we've talked about that on previous episodes. President Zeman added, what can we do against international criminality? Invest in the police, invest in the army, and maybe have the courage to invest in our own guns. My wife has a pistol. Of course, she passed all necessary tests, but now I am guarded by my wife, and not only my bodyguards, he smiled. The Second Amendment to the American Constitution says that everybody has the right to have a weapon. Of course, they must fulfill the necessary conditions and tests. We Europeans are a little more careful than the Americans, but after Barcelona and many assassinations, I think that the difference between Europeans and Americans is not so great. Czech Republic Parliament passes constitutional right to bear arms, and there's a link to that. Czech citizens are afforded some of the most liberal gun rights in Europe, although ownership rates are not as high as in nearby Switzerland, which, unlike the Czech Republic, remains outside of the European Union. Both countries enjoy a lower homicide rate than the United Kingdom, which is experiencing a surge in gun violence despite incredibly heavy restrictions on gun ownership. But the EU is bringing extensive pressure to bear on both of them to restrict citizens' gun rights. So this is something that is common sense, and yet the ruling class, they really they're afraid to let it happen. In this country, you look at the Democrats and all of the ridiculous things that they want to force you to do. Why do you think they want to get rid of the Second Amendment? Can you imagine if this country wasn't armed, the things that they would try and probably be successful? Because there's no doubt in my mind that if they could, they'd wipe me right off the air. They don't like the truth. The truth and the Democrat Party and some of the Republican Party does not mix. It doesn't mix. 7 years, you're going to repeal and replace Obamacare, and then when the time comes, you never were going to. Never. John Boehner was right. When they threw him out of the House and they caught up to him, he laughed. He said, they'll never get rid of Obamacare. He laughed. They were sticking their finger in our eye the whole time. And some of these morons will get reelected again. I don't have a lot of faith in 2018. I don't. Now prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong. I know it has to happen. I've just seen it so many times. A 90% return rate for incumbents in Congress. 90%. The system's rigged. We can beat it, but it takes work, and people are trying to work just to keep food on the table. That's the only thing that can change this, is we have to get rid of these people that have been there so long. And maybe a serious effort at a convention of the states. Maybe a convention of the states with a sole goal of term limits, and that's all. And then if that works out, then people won't be scared of it again, and maybe we could do some other ones. But if we could just do term limits, and then again, you don't know. Then again, you still got the deep state there. You know, maybe you break it up geographically. I've said that before. All right, we got some bad news here, ladies and gentlemen. This is an exclusive report from American Military News. Former West Point professor's letter exposes corruption, cheating, and failing standards. If you go to the website and you go to the show notes links and you click on the link for Story 4, the full letter is there, which we do not have enough time to read. But we'll go through this a little bit. Robert Heffington's letter comes after weeks of controversy at the military academy. Again, this is from American Military News by editorial staff and Melissa Leon. The following letter was written by retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert M. Heffington as an open letter. Heffington was an assistant professor at West Point for several years until this past August. The letter has been circulating for a few days in private among the military. Heffington confirmed to American Military News on Wednesday that he did write the letter and sent a signed copy. He wrote the letter in light of recent media coverage of Second Lieutenant Spencer Rapone, and that was covered very early here by me and Stacy, by Stacy and I. A West Point graduate and infantry officer who recently came under fire for his public advocacy and support of socialism and communism and being an official socialist organizer of the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA. The broader conversation that has been taking place in the military community now is what exactly went on and goes on at West Point that a graduate such as Rapone would feel so strongly empowered to apparently be a socialist and or communist and spread these doctrines. Heffington says the military academy turned a blind eye to Rapone's behavior and his very public hatred of West Point. While this doesn't mean leaders at West Point defend Rapone's views, it means that West Point's senior leaders are infected with apathy. They simply do not want to deal with any problem, regardless of how grievous a violation of standards and or discipline may be. It may be. Heffington writes, Rapone was recently discovered to be a communist propagandist and official socialist organizer of the Democratic Socialists of America after he posted a photo to Twitter of himself in support of professional football player Colin Kaepernick, where he is seen in his West Point uniform at graduation holding his cap that contains a piece of paper that says, "Communism will win." Rapone's social media was filled with up to hundreds of posts, messages, and photos that were being circulated around the military and civilian communities. His Twitter account now set to be protected, and his Instagram account has been taken down. His Facebook, where he goes under Giuseppe Impastato, is private. Rapone had also posted a second photo of himself in uniform, and he is seen wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt underneath his uniform jacket. And we all know that Guevara was an Argentine Marxist revolutionary who believed the poor people of Latin America would be saved by communism. Rapone is a second lieutenant and an infantry officer in the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, New York. He has deployed to Afghanistan and received a Combat Infantryman badge known by us as the CIB. Rapone has been widely criticized on the internet, and so has West Point, for seemingly allowing this behavior and appearing to turn a blind eye to an apparent communist who espouses many things the U.S. military and the United States fights against. West Point has said that Rapone's actions in no way reflect the values of the U.S. Military Academy or the U.S. Army. In Heffington's letter, he says the most recent coverage of Rapone only highlights a disturbing trend that he has observed over several years of being on the faculty at West Point, which are fundamental changes that have eroded it to the point where I question whether the institution should even remain open. The following is Heffington's letter in its entirety. Dear Sir, Ma'am, before you read any further, please understand that the following paragraphs come from a place of intense devotion and loyalty to West Point. My experience as a cadet had a profound impact upon who I am and upon the course of my life, and I remain forever grateful that I have had the opportunity to be part of the long gray line. I firmly believe West Point is a national treasure and that it can and should remain a vitally important source of well-trained, disciplined, highly educated Army officers and civilian leaders. However, during my time on the West Point faculty, 2006 to 2009, and again from 2013 to 2017, I personally witnessed a series of fundamental changes at West Point that have eroded it to the point where I question whether the institution should even remain open. The recent question, whether the institution should remain open, the recent coverage of Second Lieutenant Spencer Rapone, an avowed communist and sworn enemy of the United States, dramatically highlighted this disturbing trend, given my recent tenure on the West Point faculty and my direct interactions with Rapone, his mentors, and with the Academy leadership. I believe I can shed some light on how someone like Rapone could possibly graduate. First and foremost, standards at West Point are non-existent. Wow. Now, I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I got to give some disclosure if you're just tuning in. I went to Valley Forge Military Academy for a couple years. I was not an exemplary cadet. I eventually got thrown out of the place because I was a little gangster. But I got to tell you, we had standards. There was one way to do something, and if you didn't do it that way, you did it that way. They exist on paper, but nowhere else. The senior administration at West Point inexplicably refuses to enforce West Point's publicly touted high standards on cadets, and having picked up on this, cadets refuse to enforce standards on each other. The superintendent refuses to enforce admission standards or the cadet honor code. Jesus. The dean refuses to enforce academic standards, and the commandant refuses to enforce standards of conduct and discipline. The end result is a sort of malaise that pervades the entire institution. Nothing matters anymore. Cadets know this, and it has given rise to a level of cadet arrogance and entitlement the likes of which West Point has never seen in its history. General Mattis, I hope you're listening to this. Every fall, the superintendent addresses the staff and faculty and lies. He repeatedly states that we are going to have winning sports teams without compromising our standards, and everybody in Robinson Auditorium knows he is lying because we routinely admit athletes with ACT scores in the mid-teens across the board. I have personally taught cadets who are borderline illiterate and cannot read simple passages from the assigned textbooks. It is disheartening when the institution's most senior leader openly lies to his own faculty, and they all know it. The Cadet Honor Code has become a laughingstock. Cadets know they will not be separated for violating it, and thus they do so on a daily basis. Moreover, since they refuse to enforce standards on each other and police their own ranks, cadets will rarely find a cadet at an honor hearing, despite overwhelming evidence that a violation has occurred. This, in turn, has caused the staff and faculty to give up even reporting honor incidents. Why would a staff or faculty member expend the massive amount of time and energy it takes to report an honor violation, including writing multiple sworn statements, giving interviews, and testifying at the honor hearing when they know without a doubt the cadet would not be found, or if found, the superintendent will not separate the cadet? To make matters worse, the senior leadership at West Point actively discourages staff and faculty from reporting honor violations. I don't know the exact wording of West Point's, but I'm going to paraphrase what I do know of what the honor code is, at least the one from Valley Forge. Thou shalt not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate anyone who does, is what the honor code was. And I imagine it was taken right from West Point. So they're saying that cadets are lying, cheating, and stealing and allowing it to go on. This is big news, folks. This should be headline news on every network in the country. This is huge. Wow. I was unfortunate enough to experience this firsthand during my first tour on the facility, on the faculty. You remember, that was back in 2006, when the Commandant of Cadets called my office phone and proceeded to berate me in the most vulgar and obscene language for over 10 minutes because I had reported a cadet who lied to me and then asked if we could just drop it. Of course, I was duty-bound to report the cadet's violation, and I did. During the course of the berating I received from the Commandant, I never actually found out why he was so angry. It seemed that he was simply irritated that the institution was having to deal with the case and that it was my fault it even existed. At the honor hearing the next day, I ended up being the one on trial, as my character and reputation were dragged through the mud by the cadet and her civilian attorney while I sat on the witness stand without any assistance. In the end, of course, the cadet was not found, despite having at first admitted that she lied, and she eventually graduated. Just recently, a cadet openly and obviously plagiarized his history research paper, and his civilian professor reported it. The evidence was overwhelmingly there. His civilian professor over there was not the slightest question of his guilt, yet the cadet was not found. The professor, and indeed all the faculty who knew of the case, were completely demoralized. This is the new norm for the cadet honor system. In fact, there is now, in addition to the honor system, the willful admission process, which essentially guarantees that if a cadet admits a violation, then separation is not even a possibility. In reality, separation is not a possibility anyway, because the superintendent refuses to impose that sanction. And it goes on for many more pages, ladies and gentlemen. You can go check that out. I absolutely think that you should at steelcityresistance.com. But that's stunning, man. I mean, I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't know it was going to be that bad. We will follow up on that story. I promise you that. That is something that's not good, and it needs to be fixed. And everybody needs to be exposed. And if the news media helps out, we might be able to do this. But we all know that the news media hates the military, hates the country. So maybe they won't. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see on that one, because I'm just not altogether sure that they would like to help at all. And again, from the American thinker and Rick Moran, this one's lovely. College. Oh, by the way, just before we finish West Point, just so everybody's clear, that's taxpayer funded. That's a taxpayer funded institution. Those kids aren't paying a nickel of tuition. Matter of fact, some of them are getting salaries, at the very least stipends. There you go. But other colleges, their athletes kneel for the anthem because America is not worth being proud of. Back in the early 80s, some conservatives began raising the alarm about the rising tide of anti-Americanism in primary and secondary public schools. History textbooks became social studies textbooks. Teaching the incredible story of America's founding was given short shrift. Inspiring stories of individual Americans were omitted in favor of highlighting our many faults and teaching a form of social history that concentrated on those who were oppressed in the past. I mean, I guess this is the way we do things now. It's sad. It really is. Make sure you teach your own kids. And when I say your own kids, that's kids in your circle. Not necessarily just your biological children or grandchildren, but these kids need our help. They do. These people are evil in the education departments of our country. They've been taken over. We all know that. It's been a long haul. I mean, it didn't just start. It's something they've been working at for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the screw up on the couple times I screwed up tonight. Try not to let that happen again. Thanks to everybody listening live and those of you listening to the podcast. I guess I'll have to try to hobble them together or something like that, but we'll figure that out. The Wayne Dupree Show is up next, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to wrap it up for this week for Cold War Radio, but we will be back on Monday, and the Wayne Dupree Show will continue through Saturday, Friday, and Saturday, being 2-hour episodes. I'm Hutch Bailey Jr. on Facebook, ladies and gentlemen. Bird's Eye View on Twitter. Thanks for letting me into your life for 1 hour a couple of times. God bless.